Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the Town of Islip Planning Board meeting for Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. We're still operating remotely due to some of the restrictions due to the coronavirus. If you're just joining us and you have not already done so, please indicate which application you're here on if you're an applicant or a member of the public to speak at a public hearing, and we will call upon you at the right time to participate. We remind applicants to please keep their proposals to 30 minutes or less. And those who want to speak at a public hearing to please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We will let you know as you're getting close to either the 30 minutes or the 3 minutes. That being said, just want to go through attendance. Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Bruno?
Here.
Ms. Cruz?
Here.
Mr. Frugiari?
Here.
Mr. Matamore?
Here.
Mr. Moriarty?
Here.
Barbara, you can hear everybody?
Sorry, yes, I can hear everybody.
Thank you. All right, that being said, first item on the agenda, Planning Board application, public hearing, Stephanie Galone, PB 2020-030, south side of South 2nd Street, Ronkonkoma, 820 South 2nd Street. Applicant requests a modification of conditions associated with PB 2019-030 in order to permit a non-masonry structure to enclose the dumpster. Good evening to the applicant. When you're ready, please go ahead.
Yes, Janice Whalen, 23 Green Street, Suite 302 for the applicant, Stephanie Galone. Thank you, board members. Good evening. We simply request a modification of the condition requiring a masonry enclosure. That's proved to be very expensive. We'd like to replace it with an opaque fencing, which will be screened appropriately with plantings. The planning department has sent conditions which are acceptable, and we'll sign them and get them back.
Thank you, Ms. Whalen. You win the award for following the 3-minute rule for the public and not the 30 minutes for the applicants. We're very grateful for that.
My pleasure. Less is more.
Exactly. I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak to give us actually, I don't see anybody who signed up for it. Let me just ask, is anybody who just joined the meeting would like to speak on this application? If so, raise your hand. I see Joseph Pranito. If I'm saying that right, we'll let you in to speak. You should now be in. If you'd like to go ahead, just unmute your mic, you can speak. Joseph, you're in the room right now. If you'd like to just go ahead and unmute, you can speak.
Hey, finally.
There we go. We got you. We can see and hear you.
Thank you so much. We don't have a big issue so much as with the structure as with some of the other things that have gone on with that lot that is over there. And the only reason I got on is because I don't know if this is the right platform for this, but that where they have that structure or they want to put that structure in that yard is filled with garbage trucks and has made just a major catastrophe on South 2nd Street. I own a business there and many other guys do, and it's just created way too much going on the street with parking and not even to get into the part about having garbage trucks parked on dirt and what it's doing to the economy. Honestly, I'm not even sure if I should even be on the meeting, but we just saw the signs went up the other day, and there should be a few other people from the other business owners from the town, from our block there that would probably want to step in and say something. But
all right, so just so I understand, your major issue is it trucks parked on the street, or where exactly is the?
It's not so much that. From what our understanding is when they bought that lot, they have a lot next door to it that was supposed to be parking for their employees, which is being rented out to a guy who's running a junkyard. So it has caused major problems with me being able to have parking for myself and my customers. I've been on the block for 15 years, and some people have been down there up even further. And we want to welcome any kind of business there, but not your division, but the town of Islip has done nothing with what's going on there with the amount of parking in the cars and everything else that yard has created.
Okay, so what I'll do is, you're right, it's probably separate from this specific part of this application, but I will ask both the town planning staff as well as code enforcement to look into the issues that you've raised.
That would
May
be
I address very briefly, Chairman? I'm not going to go over my time,
Ms.
but
Whalen, what I'd rather do is just see if anybody else wants to speak. Close the
Absolutely.
public hearing, let Kelly give the report, then I'll let you speak. So just we don't go back and forth too long. I think that'd probably be better. Okay, but I will bring up these questions so that you can address them though.
thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
Oh, no, that's fine. Like I said,
Okay, thank you very much for joining in your comments.
Thank
this evening. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this? I don't see anyone else signed up. If you do, please raise your hand and we'll call upon you.
was not just me.
You're the lone guy tonight. Okay, so that
Yeah,
being said,
well, everybody's got, oh, yeah, you see the meeting, but nobody wants to do anything. And I've spoken to code enforcement too many times with the.
all right, well, we'll get that addressed for you. Thank you for joining us tonight and speaking. I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak now to give us a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is currently under site plan review for the construction of a 2,500 square foot building and accessory outdoor storage of 30 trucks in connection with the operation of a karting business. The application was brought before the board in October 2019 to get the necessary special permits for the outdoor overnight parking of registered vehicles and vehicle repair use to repair the company's own fleet of vehicles. At that time, the standard language condition regarding dumpster enclosures was drafted and signed by the applicant, which required a masonry dumpster enclosure to be constructed. The applicant has stated the cost of the masonry enclosure is too much and has requested to provide a fence and plantings instead. The proposed dumpster location is located in the rear of the property and the site is an industrial area. The applicant is still proposing to provide a dedicated area for the dumpster surrounded by a fence and screened with plantings. Therefore, planning has no issue with this proposal and recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. I'm going to turn to Ms. Whalen. Do you want to start first? I know you wanted to address the issues that were raised, and then we can go with any board
Yes,
questions.
and I appreciate, Joseph, your concerns. We are trying to get that tenant out and holistically clean up the site so that the garbage trucks are not parked on dirt, but parked on a completely engineered site with drainage and asphalt. As part of that, we're going through site plan review. So the goal is to clean this up and to make this more palatable for everyone on the block, including yourself. I'd be happy to give you my phone number if you want to contact me with any specific concerns so that we can address them.
Thank you, Ms. Whalen, for addressing that. Any questions from the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I'll go Mr. Bruno first, then Mr. Brown.
Okay. Did I hear, Kelly, did I hear you say that they're building an addition onto this building?
No, it's a brand new building. So the site's completely vacant right now. And they're building a 2,500 square foot building and they did not request a parking relaxation. So as per our code, they are providing the exact amount of parking that they need for the use.
Okay, here's my question. Why is this different than any other person building any other new building in the town of Islip? Every commercial new building has a dumpster enclosure and the dumpster enclosure is required to be masonry. So why are we changing here when that's the requirement to everybody else?
May I address that, Chairman? The reason we've made this request is because the cost of the masonry dumpster is exponentially larger than the fence enclosed dumpster, and it's not even going to be seen from the street. It's completely obscured by not only opaque fencing and planting, but it's completely in the rear of the lot, which is already like obscured from any street views. It's simply a matter of cost that we're requesting this. We'd rather put the money into the elevations.
I just wanted to, I understand from your perspective. I think what we need, Mr. Bruno wants, is maybe the staff to address why.
Oh, sorry.
Why in this instance we're allowing cost to be a consideration if we have not allowed for others, I think.
With all due respect, Ms. Whalen, that argument is made by every client every day it costs too much and whatever. I just want to know why we're making the distinction here, when in fact, if you were not in front of this board for the special conditions, that would have been required anyhow. It's a standard with all new buildings. So I'm just asking staff why they're making the distinction here. That's all.
Yeah, I can field that one. So I
Thank you.
did speak with the commissioner, and the planning staff thinks this is a unique situation, and we've only recommended this type of modification, so to speak, in these situations where the dumpsters are removed from view, from public view, whether that be behind the building, or in this case, there's actually a substantial amount of landscaping in the front yard where we don't think the visibility is as much of a concern. So we think, given the specific circumstances as they pertain to this site, warrant, the board giving some consideration to waiving the masonry enclosure. It should still be opaque and still be somewhat obscure from view, but given the other factors into the site plan, we don't have any objection to that.
Okay, thank you, Sean. That's what I was looking to know.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan.
Thanks, Sean. Mr. Brown?
Yes, Ms. Wozniak, the enclosure that they want to build with the opaque fencing and the shrubbery, does that meet or have the same dimensions of what would be with the block?
Yeah, so the dumpster enclosure that they're showing with the fencing does fit their typical dumpster that they're proposing. We don't have like an actual size. As long as it could fit the dumpster and a truck can access it, that's all we really ask for as far as the dimensions of the actual enclosure.
We don't have a specific height that says it should be over the dumpster's height or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it has to provide enough height in order to screen it, but it's not like if they were to provide a dumpster that's taller or shorter than a typical size dumpster, as long as the dumpster that they're putting inside the enclosure is screened, then that's fine. There's no specific requirements as to dimensions specifically.
Okay, and this will screen the garbage as good as the block one would have.
Yeah, they'll have an opaque fence, and then surrounding it, they're going to have evergreen plantings. So you won't be able to see it.
Just to be clear, this is not a dumpster for the garbage that's collected. Those go off-site. This is just on-site garbage.
Oh, like every industrial building that you guys probably pick up from.
No, that garbage goes to the waste recycling facilities. This is just for on-site generated garbage.
Yeah, I think Mr. Brown was saying that's like any other industrial site, the same.
Oh,
Yeah. I think that's what you were saying, Kevin, right?
Yes, that's exactly like every industrial building, like my building that I have in Ronkonkoma, they come and they pick up, and we have to have a closure.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Mr. Moriarty?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just picking up on the issue raised by the adjacent business operator, given some of those concerns he raised, and maybe I'm directing this to Sean and Kelly, are we aware of any violations on this property? And the reason I raise that is, as a general theme, I don't think we as a board should be giving particularly financial accommodations to property owners that have outstanding violations on the site. So given some of the references to the problems with the adjacent, property that's owned by this applicant, as well as the existing property that's up to this application, I was wondering if the town's aware of any violations.
I don't have a list of current violations on the property, but I definitely can get them to you. But from what I understand, they need to complete the site plan review process and kind of, build the parking lot, build the building in order to legally keep the trucks on the property, which they'll obviously need the approval of this board to continue to move forward with the process and completing with all the violations that they did have previously.
So just so I understand, though, you're building the dumpster enclosure now? Why do you need that approval now is the question I guess I'm raising in my mind, particularly if it turns out that there are code violations on this property.
I don't think there are code violations on this property. We received a notice that one would be issued, which required us to make these applications to legalize the site. I am aware of no open violations no court activity on the site. This request for the dumpster enclosure modification is so that when we go to engineering for review, they know that we've already requested this from the planning board.
All right, Kelly, if you could just confirm on the building code violations, I think that's the only question that sort of remains open in my mind.
Sean, do you have the ability to pull that up now in front of you?
Yes, I mean, I don't have permissions to view the actual details of the various violations, but some of them did stem from a couple of years ago. And my understanding is some of them would be resolved via, the permission of the planning board and site plan approval. That would close out any of the zoning ones. In terms of specific ones, I don't have all the details on them. This looks like a number of them are still open, so we'd have to verify that with code enforcement or fire marshal and public safety to see what's going to be closed out, what's outstanding, if there's any other conditional discharges, stuff like that. So
Nothing went to court. I would have known about that.
Mr. Chairman, not having the dumpster enclosure might have been one of the things that they.
Well, there's no dumpster there now, right? Because what is on the site actually right now?
It's a vacant site with a lean-to building and the trucks, which would be legalized by the special permit, which we're trying to move towards. This masonry enclosure is a matter of site plan review. And so before we get to engineering, we wanted to make sure that it was okay that we enclosed it with fencing.
Mr. Moriarty, is an approval subject to the,
Yeah,
if we approve that the whatever violations are outstanding are closed?
Yeah, I think I'm fine with that. Again, I hesitate to set the precedent to sort of authorize these accommodations. And I understand what the applicant's trying to do. They've got a series of violations. They're trying to fix the problems, but it sounds like it's a longer list than we may realize. And I just want to make sure if there are other violations, particularly given the objection that was raised by an adjacent business owner that indicates he's calling town safety and building code folks out there repeatedly based upon this applicant's actions. I hesitate to do that. With that said, I'm trying to, I'd be willing to support this accommodation again, provided that we get an understanding that those code violations are in fact corrected.
Which is consistent, by the way, with we've been calling for at the last several meetings, that not moving forward on applications where there are open violations. If in fact this will close them out, approving it subject to them being closed out prior to the construction of it is something that I would support as well. Ms. Whalen, you had a comment?
If I may be given just a short period of time to investigate if there are any open violations, what the status of them are, and I can report to the board so the board can feel confident that they're not rewarding behavior that they don't want to. I mean, certainly the goal is to bring this into compliance.
Right.
So that being said, I mean, I don't know where the board stands, but there's one option if we're okay approving it tonight, subject to those being closed out, or are you suggesting that you want to come back to the next meeting and let us know where we're at on this?
I have no problem coming back. I want the board to have a comfort level that we're not setting an adverse precedent.
Right.
So if the board wants to put this on for the next meeting, I'll provide a full report of anything that's open, which might have existed before we even own the property. And I just want to give the board a comfort level that what we're trying to do is bring about compliance.
Great. Well, and I need to get you to represent a lot more applicants in terms of the way you work.
Happy to do so. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that the planning department will let me know when to appear next.
Yes. Any other questions for Ms. Whalen? And not seeing any. Thank you very much. Is there a motion?
Yeah.
Mr. Moriarty.
I would move to close the hearing and reserve decision tonight, and then make every effort to get the applicant back on the next scheduled meeting.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. And
Thank you.
Ms. Cruz.
So motion by
night.
Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and reserve decision. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mattamore. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We're reserved. Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Thank you. I'm going to pass over items 2, 3, and 4 on the agenda right now and go to item number 5, Town Board Application Recommendation Item, J. Nazaro Partnership LP, CZ 2020-003, southeast corner of Montauk Highway, County Route 85 and Atlantic Avenue, West Sayville, 90 Montauk Highway. Applicant requests a change of zone from Business 1 District to Business 3 District. a town board special permit for a fast food restaurant pursuant to 68-302G, and a planning board special permit for outside seating and an accessory use to a restaurant pursuant to 68-3021E. A buffer relaxation is requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Yes, good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Steve Bertolino for the applicant, 130 West Main Street, East Islip, New York. To keep this short, thank you for jumping us ahead, number one. Number two, as you know, we were on for a decisional hearing once before. Kevin Brown had raised an issue with respect to the traffic. As of right now, I'm going to defer to Andrew Villari, and I can come back if the board has any other questions. Otherwise, we want to rely on the public hearing presentation as well as the presentation we did with the decisional hearing that was on a couple of weeks ago. Andrew?
Thank you.
Good evening. And for the record, Andrew Valeri, V as in Victor, Illari, project manager at Stonefield Engineering and Design. Office address is at 1601 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite 330 in Islandia. Just as a matter of housekeeping, over the summer, we did prepare a traffic impact study. It was submitted to the town, subsequently forwarded to the town's consultant, LK McLean Associates. The town's consultant did issue a review letter that was dated December 30th. We did have the opportunity to review that. We subsequently prepared a follow-up response letter to address all the outstanding items. That was dated yesterday, January 5th. But just in summary, the review done by LK McLean is generally in support of the application, where they looked at all of the different analysis assumptions that went into the study we provided and agreed with the majority of our findings. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or expand on anything further regarding the dialogue with LK McLean, or explain anything further. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bertolino, anything further from the applicant?
No, just if the board has any questions, additionally, we're here to respond.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Mr. Colgan then for a report, and then we'll come back for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This application was reserved at the October 14th hearing last year to have the traffic evaluated. A traffic impact study was submitted and reviewed by the town's traffic consultant. The comments from that review indicated that there would be significantly more vehicle trips entering and exiting the site during peak hours. In addition, a bus shelter is recommended for the existing Suffolk County Transit stop that's there by the site. It was further noted that Suffolk County Department of Public Works would also need to issue permits for the proposed use, and they'd evaluate U-turns out of the drive-through. So based on that, if the planning board feels the traffic concerns are adequately addressed, the staff recommends the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Brown?
Yes, I did see the traffic report from McLean, and it did say that there was a significant increase with the use. It would be 2 to 250 in the peak hours, which in my opinion, I wasn't thrilled with that, being next to the fire department. And I think that it significantly increases the intensity with the as of right use in business 1. Then going to business 3, there's no other business 3s anywhere around this in the area. So those are still some of my concerns. And I'd like to hear some of my colleagues speak to the traffic in the area that we've witnessed.
Chairman?
Mr. Frugieri?
Yeah, this is a question for Mr. Colgan. Mr. Colgan, typically when we take a look at a traffic study, we're assessing impacts to intersections. Here we have a downtown community, and you have 200 vehicles plus per hour coming out of, and I'm sure a majority would be coming through a drive-through, conflicting with pedestrian traffic on sidewalks. Do you feel that the traffic that would be generated by this use and the type of traffic would be conducive to a downtown area?
I mean, I guess in short answer, generally speaking, you don't want to see auto-oriented uses in a downtown area. That's why a fast food restaurant is not a permitted use in, say, a business district, which is our typical downtown zoning, which admittedly is next door and across the street. And yes, it's for the reasons you generally don't want it to compromise the walkability of, say, a downtown and people walking amongst the stores. That being said, the planning staff thought it might be worthwhile to look at this application because the applicant is preserving the building. But it does have to be weighed against the traffic impacts.
I mean, typically the traffic impacts are on, intersections and levels of service and that sort. But here, we're not looking at vehicle versus vehicle conflicts. It's vehicle versus pedestrian conflicts. And that's what concerns me.
Understood.
Further questions from the board? Mr. Valari, can I share that similar concern? Can you address the issue of the vehicle conflicts with the additional 200 plus during peak hours that were mentioned in the report?
Sure, not a problem. And I think if I'm understanding the issue correctly, it's maybe it's not the level of service impact of the project, but it's the vehicle pedestrian interaction. How will that work? So yes, there is a driveway that's being proposed, or not being proposed. It's being proposed to be reused that accesses directly onto Montauk Highway. The idea being that there could be pedestrians going east and west on that sidewalk. What I can say is that based on the way the plan's being laid out and the existing available right-of-way there are sufficient sight lines for motorists to perceive pedestrians and pedestrians to see motorists that are leaving the driveway. There are going to be, there's studies that show that about 50 or 60% of drive-through coffee shop use does go through the drive-through. So it's not 90% of the traffic is going to come through the driveway. There is going to be a portion of traffic that does use the side street out on Atlantic, and then that again goes back to the traffic signal to get back to Montauk Highway. So I'm not sure if I answered the question completely, but I could speak about anything more in depth as well.
Yeah, I mean, the concern for me is what was addressed by the other board members is we're introducing the cross traffic with the pedestrian coming out onto Montauk Highway and we're not talking about 1 or 2 cars from peak hours. We're talking, if I read the report correctly, 200 plus trips, right?
Yeah, that's trips. So that's including vehicles in and out. What you have to keep in mind is that for that drive-through, we're just thinking about people that are exiting the site, and it's exiting the total amount of people exiting the site and going through the drive-through. So, we think, I can pull up the figure just in 1 second, but the total amount of people that would be crossing that sidewalk section, it may be once a minute vehicles going through, and that makes sense with the way that the drive-through queue is processed. You order your drink, they make it, you pay, you go. So it's not a crazy amount of traffic that's going to be continuously passing there. There will be gaps in traffic. It's not going to be Long Island Expressway.
If I can chime in for a moment.
Please.
So I know some of the board members, live in the Sayville area, and I live in Bayport, specifically next to the firehouse. This is not technically, downtown. It's not Sayville proper, where, you have the pedestrians out walking on both sides of Montauk Highway going from store to store. There are no retail outlets east of Atlantic Avenue. This building, as you know, is sitting on the corner, and then you have the fire department, then you have a parking lot, and then you have a small space and a clam bar. You don't generally find, and I live out there as well and pass there twice a day, you don't generally find pedestrians walking on this sidewalk over there. There are a few shops to the west of Atlantic Avenue, and even those 3 or 4 shops that are there's not a lot of pedestrian traffic. In West Sayville, there are a series of stores, as you know, on the north side of Montauk that are east of Cherry Avenue over there. And you will find some pedestrians going into the bike shop and the insurance, whatever's over there. But this is not, I think, as the board members that are questioning it know, it's not a heavily traveled pedestrian sidewalk. And for when I read in the report, the concern was that we would be increasing the left turn trips significantly, going from Montauk Highway westbound, making a left turn onto Atlantic. So while we do appreciate the board's concerns, I think a fair consensus would be this is not a heavily traveled pedestrian area as you would find to the east in downtown Sayville.
At one
Yeah.
point, I just want to follow up about the pedestrian volume here. We did conduct an accident analysis, as the board would require for any traffic impact study. We looked at the standard 3-year period, and LK McLean looked at all this. There were no collisions with pedestrians, which is I'm very happy to say. But that tells me also is that there's no history here or propensity where you see conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles. So I really think that speaks to the type of pedestrian character we're talking about here.
Thank you. Further
Chairman?
questions from the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, could
Brown.
I add to that?
Yeah.
Yes, I would disagree with Mr. Bertolini respectfully. The area there, I go up and down Cherry all the time, and there's a significant amount of houses there that are older, some of them built in the 1870s, that have all turned over into younger couples now with children. And the amount of strollers coming up and down the streets there, and they go to the water, view the water, which directly crosses where this property would be. I'm there every weekend in that area for other reasons, and I do see a lot of pedestrians now. Also, right down Cherry Avenue is the high school, which does generate a lot of traffic, kids and stuff coming to and from school. They'll come out to get snacks during their breaks. And the high school, for many years, not this year because of the COVID, but they utilized the fire department for their breakfast. And they all hand in hand walk down that street on Saturday mornings. And then that whole area fills up with cars. So it's a lot more intense than just what a traffic survey would be giving us. It is a little area that's becoming a little downtown West Sayville area. And I think that it's intense. And I think in business 1 right now, going to business 3, it might be a little intense. We're bringing in a restaurant into that area. That's my opinion.
So, Mr. Brown, obviously, I respectfully understand your position as well, and there's never any disrespect. Ultimately, what I was trying to point out is, as you know, this area of West Sayville is not the same as downtown Sayville. I think we could both agree on that, and that's what I'm trying to point out. I'm not saying there's no pedestrian traffic there, but this is not the same as you would have in whether it's Bayshore or Sayville. You just don't have it. Yeah, you do have strollers, you do have people walking as we would want in any business district. And I do want to remind this board, although we've heard a couple of times business 3, we've specifically called out that if there is a change of use on this, and we went so far as to say as a change of tenant on this parcel, we would subject ourselves to come back to the board for a new application for approval, because we fully understand and appreciate we do not want a Burger King, a McDonald's, or a Taco Bell with that kind of traffic. This is Starbucks, as we all know what Starbucks does. It's a coffee shop, and that's what we're asking for.
Thank you. Do we have further questions from the board? Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points. One, in picking up on a couple of other suggestions that were raised by board members, I would kind of reiterate the same point. Looking at the traffic study, I was somewhat surprised by the aggregate number of site visits during peak hours. Those numbers kind of surprised me, and it seems to me it's a more intensive use than I was certainly expecting when I initially looked at the application. And frankly, I recognize Starbucks, I think, would be a good neighbor, but it's got to be the right site. One other issue that concerns me as well is queuing. I know it was a big issue that was raised by the neighbors. I pick up on it again based upon what Mr. Brown said. I think there's a lot of foot traffic on that street from younger families that are in that area. I've seen some of the queues at other Starbucks that have drive-throughs, and those flow well out of the designated areas within Starbucks on a regular basis. And most of those still work because they're in larger public parking lots. So the queuing issue is not as much of a concern on those sites. Here, it would be more of a concern to me personally, because I think that queuing is potentially going to cause traffic issues out on Atlantic Avenue if it's not properly controlled. And I know that the Starbucks does a lot of analysis on these issues, but I see the reality, particularly given the COVID situation, where Starbucks is going almost completely takeout, where those lines of cars are not 14, they're more like 28 and sometimes larger numbers in some of the other Starbucks that I've seen. Again, it was less of a concern on those sites because they flow into larger parking lots. Here, we don't have that opportunity. So again, that's another issue that kind of gives me concern about the application.
And Mr. Moriarty, we appreciate that. And, you know, I was trying to rely on what we had done earlier in the public presentation. You know, we have double the queuing that is required on this site. And for the most part, you know, I don't know that queuing is the issue. And perhaps in your mind, that's fine. You know, the bigger issue, I think, was, you know, the left turning lane onto Montauk Highway and whether or not the queuing would back up because you were unable to make a left turn out of there.
Mhm.
And that being said, you know, we have a couple of different options. As you know, you do approve sites where, you know, a no left turn, you know, is mandated. You know, we don't really want that. We would be open to that if it was a matter of getting board approval and having a no left turn, we would consider that. I would throw something else out there that we talked about on our team. You know, if possible, we would work with you know, Suffolk County DPW and see if we could get a left turn signal at Atlantic Avenue. And again, if you think about the context of what we're doing, if somebody couldn't make a left turn out of the site, it was raised that it may be because there was a red light on the westbound Atlantic Avenue intersection. If there was a car trying to make a left and they were being hung up, a turn signal there would alleviate that. Hence, the flow out of the site could flow more freely. And if the car in front is moving more freely, then the car in back is moving more freely, and you don't have those queuing problems. So your concern ties into the totality of, is the left turn there going to be an issue? Is it going to be a traffic issue on Montauk Highway? As you know, the applicant, Mr. Nazaro, is always willing to work with the board, the town, as well as any other, you know, municipal agency that's involved to do what needs to be done to make this site right. So again, you know, as a Hail Mary pass, if you will, I understand the board's concerns. I would also say, just thinking about it, you know, the people with strollers, you know, they're out there, you know, is it the peak time for Starbucks that those people are out there? I don't believe so. I think the peak time is really in the morning. With all that being said, you know, we're actually asking for the approval, as you know, but we'd be willing to go a step further and say, as we did once before, we have a change of use on this site, bring us back before the board. That's in the covenants and restrictions. We have an issue with queuing, you know, bring us back in, and that we're not monitoring the queuing well enough. And we all know that this COVID issue is creating a queue flux, if you will. It's in the reports. It says that this may change when the COVID issue goes away. So yes, we are seeing an abundance of drive-through traffic. Will that alleviate in the near future? We all hope so, for obvious reasons. But with respect to this specific site, there are lots of different ways we can work with the board, with the town, and with the, you know, DPW if need be, to help signalize that intersection in the right way so that the traffic in and out of the site and in the area flows more smoothly.
No,
I have Okay, Mr. Moriarty.
Yeah, no, just to conclude the point, I agree that it does have an impact on the traffic flow exiting, but it equally has, from my concern, is raised by the traffic exiting. But just as importantly, I'm very concerned about the queuing coming in, and a lot of it's driven very much not necessarily by what the turn going into Montauk, but just driven by the volume of customers that Starbucks is driving into their facilities right now, and their business model, which is obviously going to be heavily reliant upon the takeout model, and that's going to be driven by the drive-through. So,
Absolutely.
Yep.
Understood.
Okay.
Mr. Mattamore.
Couple of things that I don't think we've touched on to give a complete picture. And I'm looking at the aerial, and I know the building well, and like Mr. Brown, I've driven by it many, many times. Couple of factors that influence some of the things we're talking about. One is the architecture of the building itself is attractive. It's certainly more, right, in its current condition, it's more attractive than what's to the west, which is car uses of various types. We've got a big piece of land that can be utilized for planting and the like. I think it's significant that that big parcel to the east is the firehouse. I've gone through it many times. I very rarely see any activity having anything to do with a firehouse. If you're there when there is a fire, which is rare, I don't think I've been going by for 20 or 30 years at least. I've never been there where the fire trucks came out. So there's not a lot of activity that's generated by the fire department. I think that Mr. Brown's comments are taken, that Cherry Avenue is a school. But I certainly agree with Mr. Bertolino's picture of the area, that it is far less congested with pedestrian movements than, say, downtown Sayville is. You always see people on downtown Sayville in the center of town. You probably see, in my opinion, less than half or even less than 3/4 down here. The one concern I do have, and I have heard some comments from people who live down on Atlantic Avenue, that I think there is a large amount of pedestrian traffic coming from down there. Well, we're talking about pedestrian traffic, particularly where the drive-through crosses onto Montauk Highway. It's sort of two different ideas, but the people coming up and not knowing exactly the site plan or how they'll exit or enter the site from Atlantic is frankly a different issue. So I'm inclined to think that it's an improvement in keeping a building of the quality of this building. And as we know, banks tend to be that way. They spend a lot of money on their sites, and Mr. Nazaro has a reputation of doing the same thing. So I think it's always a balancing act that we must perform and weigh the good with the bad and the like. But I can see it easily analyzed as being an improvement to that end of Sayville, namely West Sayville there. And the other comment that I think is germane is, we've touched upon it a little bit, that right now, because of the pandemic, the drive-throughs are being overly utilized. I'm very familiar with the one on Sunrise Highway. They have cars backing up into that, but that's not going to last forever. The faster we can get back to normal, the better off we're going to be if we're going to continue to keep this economy moving. So I don't think it's fair to say, well, gee, there's a lot of queuing issues. And on that subject, the parking lot from the aerial is a big parking lot. There's a lot of room for queuing and parking. So yes, a lot of the comments are well taken, but to deny or not go forward with a builder like Jimmy Nazaro, whose reputation precedes him as far as the money that he spends on his sites, I think on balance, my feeling is that it's an improvement to the area, and consequently, that has to be weighed into our decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mattamore. We have further questions from the board. So the only thing I would add, and I don't know if it was addressed, we certainly talked about the cars and the pedestrian traffic, and something else that I think Ms. Colgan raises, whether or not we typically permit these types of uses in a downtown area. I know we're saying this is just outside of it, but to the west of this, there's more downtown. To the north of it, there's more. And then the change of business district in that area. I don't know if Sean wants to speak to that first, and then I'll let Mr. Bertolino speak to that. And then Mr. Brown has a question.
Well, to briefly answer your question, there's business district to the east and across the street. There's also the planned landmark preservation district with the, I believe it's the greenhouse. And I believe to the west, its own business one, although admittedly it has a downtown character with the 0 lot front yard lines.
Mr. Chairman, you're muted.
Yeah, I was talking to myself. Mr. Brown or Mr. Bertolino, I'm not sure who wanted to. Mr. Brown?
I'll let Mr. Brown go first.
Yes, I had a couple of the points too with the I'm stuck on the intensity with the traffic. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned either by the public or but any of the testimony is at the fire department, they have it's a drag strip or a practice facility. And when in use, the whole street, Atlantic Avenue and Montauk Highway fills up with cars. It jams the area. And the Flying Dutchmen have quite a very good record and reputation, but with that brings success, and they do fill the area with that. In the summertime, down the end of Atlantic Avenue is a restaurant and a very, very busy marina, which also brings a lot of traffic. And Atlantic Avenue, if you look at the beginning of Atlantic Avenue as you go down, it's not a typically regular width street. It narrows, so it congests everything. So I'm really stuck with the idea, with the intensity and everything, that the change of use is not something I could support.
Mr. Chairman, if I may address the intensity question.
Sure, Mr. Valari, Mr. Bertolino, the floor is yours.
Regarding the intensity, we're the number 200 has been thrown around a couple of times here. 250. What does that really mean? That's the total number of trips. And when you have a use such as a Starbucks with a drive-through, not all of the traffic is new traffic. Then the rest of the traffic is actually pass-by traffic. It's traffic that's already going through the intersection. Now, you could build something on this property that's an as-of-right use, such as a daycare. A daycare is a permitted use here that has a much different characteristic of traffic that would generate a very similar number of vehicles as a Starbucks of this size. This is a fairly sizable property. It's an acre. You could build on this property a 10,000 and 11,000 square foot daycare that would generate just as much new traffic as the Starbucks would. And taxes the same roadway network, except it's all new traffic. You have those young parents in the neighborhood. Now they're driving to and from this center. Regarding the queuing, which I know was a point raised a couple of board members ago, the queuing on site does exceed the town's requirement. It actually exceeds Starbucks corporate standards, which you may be thinking, like, how could that be? That's because, to Mr. Matamore's point, no one knows how long COVID's going to be around, including Starbucks. So, there are ways to get around that. Should there be a queue that does exceed 14, we do have a bypass lane here. You could also, and when we've seen this on other applications in the town, maybe put some cones that block off parking and extend that drive-through queue further into the property. And again, this is an acre site. This is a very sizable site where you could have a use of this size and character.
And to that point with the site, and forgive me, I don't know if it was Mr. Brown or Mr. Moriarty. If you go back to the public hearing, which was somewhat contentious, even between myself and maybe some members of the board, at some point, I don't know that it would be fair to judge the application because there's a fire department conducting, drill team exercises on a racetrack behind us. And if we all agree that happens and it occurs and it does get crowded, and that's just a wonderful thing that we want in our communities, especially in the summertime, as I pointed out. I mean, it is all good, but on a day-to-day basis, we don't have that volume of traffic, as Mr. Matamore said. And again, I'm not here to say that we're right and you're wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong, and any one of the board members. But I think the consensus would be that this particular site in this area of Islip, and particularly West Sayville, is not a heavily traveled pedestrian site. We have enough room on this site to queue more cars in the rear if we need to. We're willing to make any accommodation that we can with respect to the turning and the queuing at the traffic light on Atlantic Avenue and Montauk Highway. With that being said, we went so far as to say, again, as you know, Mr. Nazaro and I made the presentations with Wendy's over a course of 4 years, and we got the Wendy's approved. I mean, that's right across the street from the schools. I know it's far away from this site, but ultimately it's not a business 3 area, and yet you have a multitude of high intensity business 3 type restaurants. You had the McDonald's, the Taco Bell, the Wendy's. That was our application, Mr. Nazzaro's project. And, you know, many of the same concerns were raised. And to date, knock on wood, there's been no issue with any pedestrians or increase in traffic issues. Down here, we have significantly less traffic in this area of Islip and West Sayville. And I do appreciate the board's concerns all around. We addressed them all, I thought, pretty good at the public hearing. You know, I rely on the board's, you know, good intentions to make an appropriate decision, understanding that we'll work, and Mr. Nazzaro has agreed to work any way possible, you know, no left turn, work with DPW for a traffic light, signalized intersection change, whatever we need to do to make sure there's no issue in this site, we're willing to do it.
Chairman?
Mr. Bruno.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everybody seems to think about Starbucks, and Mr. Bertolino talked about it when we were talking about this problem with pedestrians as being a morning thing. But I'm looking right at you know the what was written in the traffic warning. It says the results of the analysis indicate that the proposed project will generate 227 trips during the weekday AM peak hour, 250 trips during the weekday midday peak hour, and 224 trips during the weekday PM peak hour. This isn't a peak situation. In other words, from what I'm reading, unless I'm missing something, this traffic is consistent through the whole day. That's what appears to be what I've just read. Am I wrong about that? And by the way, it's kind of tough for me. I mean, I'm not a traffic engineer, but 250 trips in an hour, isn't that one every 15 seconds? So I'm just trying to understand how, if this is consistent traffic, every 15 seconds, I really don't see how anybody with a stroller, I don't see how a jogger gets past this thing, but that may be my opinion. So thank you.
Yeah, I could address that one up front. It's not one trip every 15 seconds. There's a difference between a trip and a vehicle also. So a trip is the total entering vehicles and exiting vehicles, right? So you have 200 trips, that's 100 vehicles entering and 100 vehicles exiting, right? And then that's not, and there's multiple points of entrance for the site. You have to enter on Atlantic Avenue. So it's not as frequent as every 15 seconds. I hope that that clears that up.
It does. And I realize it was more complicated than that, but you do agree that those numbers are indicating that there is a consistent traffic throughout the day.
Right. That was your first point. And let me address that. So the way we increased or forecast how much added traffic this project would generate is that we used the ITE manual, and LK McLean looked at that and also agreed with the way that we estimated it. I think it's fair to say that Starbucks is busier in the morning than it is in the afternoon, than it is in the middle of the day, and that's just because of the coffee element. But the ITE manual, it conservatively says that it's consistently busy throughout the course of the day. So traffic in this area is busier in the afternoon. And I believe I mentioned that at the last hearing that we had in the summer. So, we're assuming that this is going to be just as busy in the afternoon as it is in the morning, but we just know that's not the case. So what's baked into our analysis is a couple layers of redundancy where we know we're being conservative. And I think that's why LK McLean had blessed those types of assumptions that went into it.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno, you're okay with the answers? Yep. Okay. Anything further from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No, Mr. Chairman, we thank you for your time, the board's time and consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Brown,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion if you accept it.
that's what I'm here for.
And Mr. Berlino, as I mentioned a couple times, at this point, I couldn't support it, but your client, Mr. Nazzaro, is one of the better projects. He's done more projects than most developers in the town of Islip, and we've never had complaints from him. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion tonight to reserve decision continue the conversation. So with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to reserve tonight.
There's a motion by Mr. Brown to reserve decision. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
I'm going to give it to Mr. Matamore, who had his hand up first. Mr.
Okay.
Frugieri had the first comment. Inez had both at the same time. So I'm going to go Mr. Matamore with the second. All in favor of reserving?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions were reserved. So Mr. Bertolino, I think it was headed towards not going through. I think you said you're willing to look at other options, and I tend to agree with Mr. Brown that maybe there are other things you can do, and obviously talk to the planning staff and see if you can.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Happy New Year to all.
Thank you.
There you go. Next item on the agenda, Town Board application recommendation item E17 Holdings LLC CZ 2020-024 north side of Main Street, State Route 27A, number 269E, approximately 101 feet west of Laurel Avenue, East Islip, 269 East Main Street. Applicant requests Town Board permission to convert a 5,638 square foot health club into a medical office pursuant to TC 3416. A park and relaxation is requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant. When you're ready, you're in the room, just unmute. You can go ahead and speak.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the applicant, Brian Kennedy from the law firm of Forcelli, Deegan and Toronto, with offices at 333 Earl Ovington Boulevard, Suite 1010, Uniondale, New York, 11553. Thank you for moving us ahead on the agenda. With that, I will keep this as brief as possible and rely on the testimony given at the December 9th public hearing, with the one addition that after the public hearing portion of this application, the town's consultant, L.K. McLean, recommended that the applicant provide an additional 20 parking spaces, either on their site or one of the adjacent sites, namely the Fairfield parking lot. That would increase the number of spaces provided from 36 to 56. The applicant has agreed to provide these additional spaces. However, this process will require additional negotiations with the owners of Fairfield and consultation with the parking staff, with the planning department staff. The applicant has already prepared one possible location for the addition of these parking spaces. However, the commissioner has expressed some concerns about those locations. So we will continue to work with the planning department to resolve that issue prior to any appearance before the town board. I have Andrew Valeri of Stonefield Engineering here to answer any questions, as well as the applicants, Leon Mayer and Bradley Littman.
Mr. Chairman, your mute is on.
There we go. I'm glad somebody's keeping an eye on me. Ms. Kennedy, thank you for your presentation. If you have nothing further at this point on your end, what I'll do is I'll ask Mr. Colgan to give us a report, and then I'll come back and we have questions that we can get addressed afterwards. I just, my only question to you would be one of, before Mr. Colgan goes forward, if we haven't resolved those issues yet that the town's engineer, traffic engineer has asked for, I just, not sure why we're here at this stage of the game, but why don't we go to Mr. Colgan for a report and then we can come back. I mean, it sounds like you're willing to try and move in that direction, but you haven't resolved that issue yet is sort of my concern. But Mr. Colgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As stated, this application was previously heard on December 9th last month. The primary concern raised at that time was having sufficient parking for the health club, as the parking in front of the proposed pediatric office would be exclusive for that medical use. The applicant has responded to the town's traffic consultant comments. The traffic consultant then opined that 20 additional spots should be installed to make up for the lost spots in the front yard, as 51 spots will be reduced to 36 spots, and those 36 spots will be exclusive to the pediatric office and will not be available for either the health club or theater patrons. The attached conditions require that 20 spots be installed in the rear of the property. The location of these spots would be determined later during site plan review. So that we don't have the definitive location of where those spots would go, but those could be determined during site plan review, and if any additional modifications are needed based on that review, then the staff would bring the site plan application back to the planning board. So based on the findings of the traffic consultant, the attached conditions are recommended.
Mr.
I know I'm
Chair,
muted. Yeah, I'm talking to myself, trying to unmute quick, but it's not going that fast. It's all types of problems tonight. That being said, so Ms. Kennedy, you're okay with Ms. Colgan just said, obviously it would be an approval subject to those 20 additional spots at discretion of the, I guess, planning staff in terms of site plan review, where they're going to be. If not, you'd have to come back before us.
That is correct. We are okay with that.
Thank you. Okay, further questions from the board then? No, that makes it easy. You're in agreement with what they said, so then that's okay on this end. That being said, would you like to add anything else?
I would like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, the members of the board, and Mr. Colgan and the other members of the planning staff for their assistance in this application.
Great. Thank you all. Is there a motion? Mr. Mattamore.
I make a motion to approve the application subject to the information and condition laid out by Mr. Colgan. And in any kind of a retrofit like we're doing, it's not easy. And it usually takes longer, but I think it's important that we're trying to make it easier for the public who are doing these things, and the effort in going over a reserved decision so that they can work this out, I think is appropriate. So with that, I make a motion to approve it subject to that condition.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Mattamore to approve the application subject to the terms and covenants and restrictions outlined by Mr. Colgan, enter in the record this evening.
Right.
Mr. Moriarty has his hand up.
Yeah, I would second that, but just a quick question before we proceed with the vote. Is the reference to the 20 additional parking spaces shown currently in the covenants and restrictions? Is there any mention of that? I just want to make sure that we're capturing that concept properly.
Yeah, I will pull it up, but I believe it is under the site plan conditions.
Okay.
It is number 9A.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so there is a second by Mr. Moriarty to Mr. Mattamore's motion to approve subject to the terms and conditions or covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? I'm sorry, is all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions were approved. It's a long night and yet it's early for me. All right, we're going to take the next three items together, item 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to read them all and then we'll go into the report because I don't think the applicant's here. Planning board application decision item GSM 717-725 LLC PB 2020-022 northeast corner of Veterans Memorial Highway, State Route 454 and Broadway Avenue, Holbrook, 725 Broadway Avenue. Applicant requests the planning board special permit for a warehouse use in the industrial corridor district pursuant to 68-466.1B. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of this application. Item 3, GSM 717-725 LLC PB 2020-023, east side of Broadway Avenue, Holbrook, 717 Broadway. Applicant requests a planning board special permit for the outdoor overnight parking of registered vehicles as an accessory to a warehouse use in the Industrial 1 District pursuant to 68-340.1C. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of this application. Item 4 on the agenda, planning board decision item, the Lotto Property Group LLC, PB 2020-024, north side of Veterans Memorial Highway, State Route 454, and east side of Broadway Avenue, Holbrook, 5901 Veterans Memorial Highway. Applicant requests a modification of planning board special permit conditions associated with PB 1999-09 in order to increase the size and change the layout of the outdoor overnight parking area for registered vehicles. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of this application. I believe that the applicant is not here, so we go directly to Ms. Wozniak for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application's just been brought back to the board in order to finalize special permit and site plan modification conditions and to allow the town to establish lead agency as part of the secret process. Since the hearing, the applicant provided additional information regarding site lighting and sound mitigation measures, as those were concerns brought up at the previous hearing. So planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the conditions that were emailed to the board earlier today.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board? Not seeing any. Ms. Wozniak, can you just quickly run down with the, I don't know if they're part of the record, which what the conditions are?
Like to read out all the conditions or the time I sent them or?
How long did it take you to read the conditions? Can you speak fast like me?
Well, they're pretty long, I think.
If not, then just read out the, if there's, I don't know if there's any way to reference the document, which one we're talking about, since it wasn't part of the original
Yeah, so
packet.
the one that was emailed by Sean, let me see, because they are quite long. I think each
Yeah.
is like
It's about
5
6:07 this afternoon or evening, I should say.
Yep. it was
Yeah, there's a
607.
607. So it's documents, it's just the PB 2020-022, DOC XPB 2020-23 doc X and PB 2020-024 doc X, which was sent by Mr. Colgan to us at 6:07 PM. So those will be the conditions. And the only reason I state that on the record is they have not yet been formally approved. So we want to obviously move this forward. It'll be subject to those conditions being agreed to by the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to
Brown.
state that I did receive the conditions also, which I hope that every member did, and also the lighting diagram that they did send out. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions at all to Ms. Wozniak?
Just, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Moriarty?
just one question, Kelly. I think there was a change to the sound attenuation wall as well. Am I accurate on that? Was that?
I don't believe that they changed anything from the last hearing. So the sound attenuation wall, I believe, is a 14-foot wall with a 10-foot sound attenuation wall on top of it. So in total, it's about 24 feet tall, and that hasn't changed since the last hearing.
But did they not clarify that the sound or from grade of the parking lot, the height of this goes over?
Yeah, they
top of
showed
what a
the
tractor
truck
trailer-
Yeah, they showed the truck diagram, which does show that the tractor trailer is shorter than the wall itself.
Okay.
That was a concern last time, so they did address that for us.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, they also gave us a diagram that showed the distance that you could see. It was 145 foot out, I think, with the site view.
Great. So there's no further questions from Ms. Wozniak. Is there a motion?
Chairman,
Mr. Furjari?
I'll make a motion to approve this application, subject to the town board being a lead agency and the covenants and restrictions that we've received and will refer to at this meeting.
So Mr. Colgan?
Yeah, just to reiterate, we also need to adopt the negative declaration pursuant to secret regulations prior to adopting the conditions and granting the application.
Okay, so then I'll rescind my motion and make a motion to adopt a negative declaration for the secret.
Okay. So, and subject to the conditions.
Well, that's the first. The first would be just to
We do two separate
adopt the
motions?
neg deck. Yeah, adopt the neg
Okay.
deck for the seeker, and then we can go to the other.
Got it. So we'll do the motion by Mr. Furjari to adopt the neg deck for secret, and then is there a second? Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, granted. Mr. Furjari?
Now I'll make a motion that we grant this application, subject to the covenants or restrictions that were presented to us and referred to this evening.
There's a motion by Mr. Furjari to grant the application, subject to the covenants restrictions that were sent to us and referred to this evening at the meeting. Looked like Mr. Brown, that was a second.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, for clarification, this is PB 2020, 22, 23, and 24 altogether, correct?
Correct. This
Yeah.
is items 2,
Okay,
3, and 4 on the agenda, 2020, 22, 2020, 23, and 2020, 24.
Right, Mr. Chairman, I'll second the motion.
Second, motion second by Mr. Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion's granted. Is there any further business before the board? No. Happy New Year. See you all in 2 weeks.
Okay, great.
Motion to adjourn.
So it's by Mr. Bruno, second by
Oh.
Mr. Moriarty. All in favor, opposed, abstentions,
Aye.
adjourned.
Have a good night,
Thank you.
everybody.